Today we are at St. Charles Pharmacy here in Vienna, a pharmacy with roots going back to 1886. You can still feel that history in the space around us, with original pharmacy furnishings from the Austro-Hungarian period still preserved here today. And that makes this a pretty special place to talk about the future of pharmaceutical logistics. Today on Inside the Hold, we're exploring a paradox in pharmaceutical logistics. We've never had more visibility. IoT trackers now follow shipments in real time, giving us constant insight into temperature, location, and condition. But with that visibility comes a new challenge, because when everyone tracks everything, who do you trust? And does more data actually make the supply chain smarter or just more complex? Let's find out. Today, we're joined by Joel Wobner, Director of Pharma, Air France KLM Martin Cargo, Susan Hoffman, pharmacist here at the St. Charles Pharmacy, Felix Verbel, the Associate Director, Logistics Operations Hub Moderna, Cyril Winkler, Global Air Logistics Healthcare Product Lead at Kuehne Nagel, and Jeff Lander, Director, Global Logistics Engineering at Moderna. Thank you all for joining me. To set the scene here, looking at the rise of IoT in pharma logistics, let's start with you, Jeff. Where does IoT genuinely improve management of pharmaceutical shipments? And where is it still more perception than operational reality?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, let's say, education in the space that needs to happen, right? Everybody's striving for, let's say, real-time visibility, but people are really struggling with where and how to get started, right? And the context of pulling everything in together is important, right? So we have a data agnostic platform where we integrate and pull in, our SOPs, our carrier milestones, our device milestones, and our packaging, right? So we are carrier agnostic. So that way we can have all the data in one singular pane of glass or one singular platform. And where I think people struggle with is that, as you already mentioned, pharma is not short on data. Pharma is short on context, right? So that's why having control of that data into, let's say, your platform is so important, because when you look at each of those individual silos, so for instance, if I look at temperature data, well, temperature data doesn't tell me anything if there's no context associated, right? So I could look at a shipment with an excursion or an issue, but if I don't know the context surrounding that, the milestones, where it was routed, the ambient weather data, if I don't have that, then that data means nothing, right? And having those in silos makes it tough to come to some sort of, optimization or conclusion. So it's important to own your own data and manage your own data in your platform. And for years, we were on a journey we went through 3 different pilots in 4 years of different platforms.
Cyril, what has IoT changed in your day-to-day operations, and what has it maybe made more smarter and also maybe more complex?
Yeah, the day-to-day changes, we get more visibility. We see better what is going on. The complexity is it shows more truth, and you get more questions, right? So what happened? Where is this happening? Why did it go on that route and not on this route? And things become very transparent on an industry that historically hasn't been very transparent. So this is a challenge for certain parts, but it brings a lot of insights, and it gives us opportunities to improve. And I think that's the interesting part on that. It brings complexity in how we manage these devices. We need to pair them to shipments. We need to look that they're at the right place, placed in the same location, that we have comparable results. But overall, the more data we collect and we can put it in context, and luckily we can do that with our platforms, it helps us to find out what is happening in these shipments. Where do we need to address certain topics? And this is where in the end, it simplifies things. But building it and building these systems where we connect the different data, that's where the complexity is. It's not in the use of the individual device. It's really building this platform and making sense of the data. The data alone does not help us.
Joel, what's fundamentally different about visibility today, and what problems has greater visibility still yet to solve?
Yeah,
So I think I will echo what Cyril just said on in terms of visibility. So when we increase our visibility, we have more control over our flows. We also see what is happening in our warehouses, on our aircrafts. We have better control due to the transparency, and therefore we can take actions. I think the last part, to take actions at the right moment in time, that is the complexity which is still out there in the industry, also including ourselves, to be able to act upon the data. So what Cyril just said about, you can have all the data, you need to contextualize it, have an infrastructure around it, but you also need the people to interfere in the process. And I think this is still an element in the total supply chain, including an airline like Air France, KLM, and Martinair, to then also be able to interact on the ground and make sure that the product integrity is kept.
And Suzanne, when the shipment data actually reaches the pharmacy, at what point does it actually influence decisions, and when does it remain more theoretical than practical?
To be honest, it's really theoretical because we never see any data in the pharmacy. We only can ask our last distributor for some cold chain data, but we never get the data from the distributor. Um, Only we ask, then we get it. um, yeah, so it's really theoretical, but it's very important for some medications to have unbroken cold chains.
And looking at more data and the element of complexity, Cyril, when there are multiple data streams available, how do they impact accelerating decisions versus potentially creating hesitation, delays, or navigating that side of things?
I think in our case, it's the more data we get, um, the more basis we have on interpreting this, taking decision, putting it into context. So it's not, I don't think we have data that is competing, or when we have two different sources, which one is the correct one to go with. We were in healthcare logistics, we all work with fully validated providers. So we know the measurement results we get, they are true. And often we get the question, the logger was wrong, this can't be, and it's like, I worked in that industry before, and it's really, it's almost never the logger. It's it's something really did go wrong. So don't question what it measured, question why did this happen? And there, the more data you get, the more it actually helps you to put it in context, find out what happens, analyze the situation. And it doesn't make sense to have like multiple devices record the same data from different providers, from different sources. This is what often happens because it's complex to integrate the data from the shipment and the storage and the pre-storage and these things, which is in different kind of silos today. And in the past, it was like, let's just put on another logger, and then we have the entire data stream, because that was easier than integrating the individual data from different systems, from different providers. And I think today we are there with APIs and with the more modern systems that you can combine that data in easier ways. There's companies specifically focusing on this, being device neutral, being platform neutral. And that helps, that technology helps to bring it together and give us better insights. So I don't think we have a lack of data, or we have competing data. It's bringing it together.
Looking at that side of things with different data sets, Joel, when you have customers who bring different trackers to the product and to the system, how do you handle differentiation in the data sets between potentially their loggers and their trackers and the trackers that you're using?
Yeah, a good question. So this happens indeed, where there's a logger data sharing some information or active tracking, and we have the milestones of which are defined in the industry. So what we have done also to overcome such a thing is to be more active on the scope, the sphere of influence we have, and that is all the PMC. So it's getting a bit more technical. They are attached with a logger, so we can track all the PMCs going worldwide. So if there's let me clarify that a bit. So every pharma shipment which is built up on a certain pallet, it has a logger. So we know on 19,000 of these pallets going worldwide, with 180 of the assets being deployed, which when this tracker comes close to such a warehouse, we get a ping and we know where it is. So we have this milestone very clarified through a portal, through the trackers we have deployed. But sometimes you have situations where the trackers have different elements, and this is a complex world we are entering where there's differences between the two. We believe that IoT is leading. We're not there yet, but this is something we're deploying, and we're also seeing that the IoT devices we have on our pallets going worldwide and having the interface with the warehouse where it's been deployed, we see more matches on that side. So we're not there yet. It's still complex to match the two different elements, the milestones and the trackers. But also with our own investments in this era, we see that there's more equal information at hand.
Jeff, increased data points can be beneficial, but at what point do additional trackers stop adding control and start potentially creating internal confusion and maybe even external confusion with customers?
Yeah, so the thing that I would address there is that really the data needs to be fit for purpose, right? And when we were talking about earlier about visibility downstream to even pharmacies and like end users, right? Hospitals, coming back to kind of what data is being fit for purpose. We had rolled out IoT tracking the last couple of years, strictly in the US for 50 to 60,000 shipments a year. But what made that program work is it wasn't because we were handing them all of the associated temperature data, because someone sitting in a pharmacy or let's say a hospital doesn't know how to use the device or is unlikely to know what to do. And then what ends up happening is that you start creating nuisance excursions or alarms, because then you have that education piece of I receive it, I don't know what to plug in, I've never seen this before. By the time that I've opened my package and received this device, it's probably at room temperature for a cold chain product. And by the time I read the instructions on what to do and how to stop it, now I've created another issue downstream where, now I need to put it on hold. Is the product okay? So again, coming back to fit for purpose, the level of visibility and information that we may give to maybe a customer is going to vary very differently than what we handle upstream with our contracted partners. So the information that we share or have access to our freight forwarder or a 3PL is going to different from even our internal quality folks. Or let's say we might have manufacturing folks that just want to know when a shipment is going to arrive and if it arrived okay. They're not going to get the entire data set that maybe someone in our logistics team or our distribution team would have. So again, coming back to contextualizing, but also making it fit for purpose. So in the uh, arena of what like the pharmacy might receive, the device that they get is essentially a go, no go. It's a green or red, where requires no, let's say, pharmacy or customer interaction. So there's a button on it that they have to push, but in the event that they don't push the button, it's okay, because there's actually a light sensor on there that will automatically shut off the device without having some of those, let's say, fit for purpose, or let's say having those nuisance excursions or alarms that would be triggered, let's say, with a lack of education. So again, it's not a matter of throwing more data, right? So the level of data that you share and that you view and that you have access to may vary very differently depending if you're manufacturing, if you're clinical, if you're a customer, if you're distribution, if you're quality. So that's where I think it's important to make sure that it's not just generating data for the sake of generating data. It's adding context, but also making it fit for purpose.
And connecting on that, Cyril, does greater data sharing improve collaboration within the process, or does it potentially introduce new challenges between yourselves and potential partners or existing customers?
I think data sharing is my favorite or my secret buzzword for the last 24 months. We started with a project pretty much 2 years ago at Logi Pharma, where we reached out to the major real-time providers at the time, looking exactly for this, that we actually share data amongst customers, and thus that we stop adding more and more loggers to the same shipment, recording the same temperature. And funny enough, this was for some technically at that time not possible to realize. And we really went out. We did this RFI, and only had one provider, which was pretty much on the spot, ready that this could be configured without additional programming and all that. And that's the solution we chose for, and we collaborated on, which helped us that we both get, or both sides get, the real visibility of the same data. We could reduce the numbers of data lovers, and this collaboration, it brings trust. We use the same source, we see the same information, and I think it's absolutely key to go that way. And other providers in the meantime have realized that. Today they're all capable of doing that 2 years later. But it was quite the journey getting there, and I think there is still a lot of potential in collaborating even more. And it, as mentioned before, collaboration has become simpler. When we had USB loggers at the time with all proprietary data formats and things like that, it was more difficult to gather that data and integrate it. Where today the APIs, to not the pharmaceutical APIs, but the technical APIs, allow this in a much simpler way. So I think that journey has just started.
And Joel, what is the airline's role in this ecosystem? Are you a data provider, a data integrator, something else? How does the airline play a role here?
So collaboration definitely resonates also for us as an airline. We also see that we should be working together in having the visibility of what's happening. At the same time, we are responsible of what is happening in our warehouse, in our aircrafts, and at the GHAs where the aircraft lands. So we also want to have our own visibility on what is happening in our warehouses. We already touched upon it earlier. Visibility will help us to have better control, which in the end also helps to have a better product integrity. So yes, we need to collaborate because we also have data to share with maybe a 3PL in this case, to also share data on what is happening. Did we put it in the cool cell? When did we put it in the cool cell? When did we take it out? How long was it on the tarmac? When is it in the aircraft? And this is also interesting. We have some new aircrafts coming up in the next year where we also have Wi-Fi on board, and this will also provide some new elements of having visibility. So I think, to answer your question, we are there for the collaboration. We also want to be the owner of the data when it comes to our own warehouse, because based on that data we can optimize it and everybody will profit from that optimization.
Yeah, and I think to other point from Joel here, and one point that I also want to bring home with this is that we're not sharing, right, any type of proprietary information, right? We're not sharing how the drug is manufactured, right? This is all contextualized lane data that actually could lead to significant, let's say, optimization opportunities. Even how we validate, right, a package, right? So typically when you validate a package to, for a particular lane or for a particular routing, you look at worst case ambient profile. But if you had data sharing that you could actually start to contextualize all of the lanes and ambient temperature and routings in true time over a much larger data set, then maybe even upstream, you wouldn't need to validate your packaging to well beyond what is actually happening in the field. But you need that field data to be able to then add in the right amount of risk and buffer in your, let's say, pharmaceutical packaging validation, where right now you've got companies that will test up to 45, 50 C for an ambient profile, and you've got shippers that are qualified for 48 hours, when in reality in the field they'll last 96 or 120 hours based on the ambient profile. So the data sharing would allow, packaging companies, freight forwarders, manufacturers to actually, again, coming back to context and contextualize what that real world data looks like, both ambient and routing, and also maybe impact even upstream the validation, which again, if you're using more fit for purpose packaging and not trying to take every risk out of the supply chain unnecessarily, then again, there's opportunities for optimization on service levels, on packaging types. So that's why, even to Cyril and Joel's point, there's a huge opportunity to do, data sharing of again, it's non-proprietary information.
To add on that, maybe I think the challenge today is there's a lot of companies which still only record the data for the product, because that's the primary, that's where you're pretty much obliged to, right? You need it for the regulatory release, and they don't record the ambient temperature, which is basically what influences what type of packaging, what type of service you need. And you need that ambient data to really go and optimize. And we've switched with a lot of customers that we monitor both, but yeah, it adds cost to that, but you get so much more visibility and insights what is happening. And for any real-time intervention case, if you monitor the inside, if the inside temperature starts to move, you're too late. So much has already gone wrong till you reach that point that if you monitor the ambient on top of that, you see what's happening, and you can potentially intervene and save a shipment before something happens on the internal temperature. And on that external temperature, it's a bit the challenge. There's different setups, different companies do it in different ways, so it's not always even if we share it, it's not the same type of data. Some put the logger on top, some put it on the side, underneath, that has a huge influence how you then read that data. So I think there's still some potential there, but yeah, we need those profiles, and we have potential to share and optimize more there.
And as Cyril and Jeff, you were just touching on there, a temperature deviation can be devastating to a pharmaceutical shipment. Suzanne, from your side of things, looking at the pharmacy, why is it so critical to have that unbroken cold chain for you, and how devastating can it be for the customers that you serve and the people who need these vital products if there is a deviation in the temperature?
So, for some medications like vaccines or some biologics, the temperature between 2 and 8 degrees is necessary. And if the range isn't okay, so then the product isn't safe for the patient. So we need to have the data that the medication has an unbroken cold chain. That's important for us, and it's important for the patient. To be honest, the last step, the patient by himself, is the critical step, because we don't know if the patient go home and put it in the fridge, or yeah, whatever he does or she does with the medication. So the whole data from the beginning of the production till the pharmacy is okay, but and it's necessary to know, but we don't know what the patient does with the medication. So yeah, that's maybe a problem. But for us in the pharmacy, it's important to get from the distributor the information about the cold chain. And yeah, one time in our career here in the pharmacy, we had a problem with the cold chain, and yeah, we must throw it away, the medication. Yeah, so that's a very expensive stuff, but yeah, it's necessary because it's not safe for the patient.
And as we move towards a smarter supply chain, Joel, what is the single biggest barrier, whether technical, commercial, regulatory, that is really preventing IoT from delivering the full potential that it can have?
Yeah. So the barrier we see, so we have been introducing these trackers on all our pallets going worldwide. There's many different developments in this industry. It's LoRa. Well, you are more familiar with all these developments, but what I've understood, it's LoRa, it is 4G, 5G, and what we see is that, yeah, there is a potential of using it, but the cost to have it in place on critical service levels we want to provide is still a barrier for deploying it to the fullest potential. So we are hoping for further developments, reduction of the cost, so that we can, on the places where we are responsible of the shipments, can have a better visibility and real-time monitoring. Yeah.
And obviously, there's a huge amount of data around, but Cyril, is the industry's real gap a lack of technology or a lack of alignment around the data that's already there?
I think it's a bit of both, but with a strong bias to the alignment. The technology evolves, it makes it simpler. It could be, yes, we all wish it would be at the price level of a USB logger or even lower today. Then it would, as you said, it would expand much more. We would be using it more customers would jump on it. But this evolves. And if we look back 5 years, 10 years, these price levels have come down massively. The business models have adapted to what the real needs are. So on the technology side, I think it evolves. We use it. We adapt. We see these platforms arising, right, which combine the different data from different sources. So I think on that side, it's a continuous development which leads to the alignment, and the alignment is what we really need and what brings context and insights, what we're actually looking for. The technology alone doesn't help us much. It's the combination of that and bringing it to the insights.
And producing these valuable and sensitive vaccines and pharmaceutical products, Felix, what would an ideal supply chain look like for you in, say, 5 years' time?
Yeah, I think there are multiple aspects to look at that we can definitely improve looking at the data, right? I think on the one hand, having real transparency and actual insights into what the temperature throughout not only a single transportation leg, but throughout the whole supply chain looks like would ultimately transform everything, right? Because if you actually use real ambient data, not actually standards that you use for the qualification of packaging, but actual real data that you see in a plane, that you see in a truck, on a boat, anywhere, then you could suddenly design your packaging, design your whole transportation setup in a way that it suits the product in the most efficient way. And that not only from a cost perspective, but also from a temperature and quality aspect, right? So suddenly you can look into which specific packaging do I want to use based on a temperature that is currently in a certain destination. What is the weather like? I can react much more short notice. We know the world is changing much faster, so all the standards that we work with, they can never adapt so quickly. So if we use the real data that we have throughout the network, we can adjust our supply chain in a way and our transportation networks in ways that it actually always ensures the product arrives in a good status in a pharmacy in the end, that it can be used for a patient. And that also a pharmacy can see not only for the last distribution leg if they want to, but they can see throughout what happened even in the first transport leg from a manufacturing site towards a first warehouse. Was also there everything fine, right? So this would ultimately change that, of course. And in the end, also for the planning for any pharmaceutical manufacturer, if you definitely know what's the status of your products, what's the status of your raw materials maybe coming in, where are they, what's the temperature, you obviously change also inventory management, all the planning procedures inside a company. That's, I think, obvious as well.
So, a question for everyone here. What is the one change that would make the biggest difference in turning data into real operational value? Jeff, maybe you kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's still a bit of an education component with partners in the supply chain, right? Everybody talks about visibility, but again, how to get started, where to get started, how to deploy, right? I mean, even Joel, as you were talking about earlier with, KLM, Martin Air France, about when do you deploy it, how do you deploy it, getting comfortable with deploying it. And again, not all partners are still even willing to data share or have even some of the existing integration. So I think if you really want to truly operationalize, then you really need the industry to buy into the technology, but also buy into the collaboration. And if you've got people that are resisting and people that are, again, not adding context around here, that until you add the context, the rest of the data generated in silos doesn't add a ton of value. So I think there's a bit of an education piece, because there are plenty of times where I have people come up to me all the time and say, well, how do you get started? And where do you get started? And why did you get started, right? What were some of the problem statements? And until you understand what you're trying to solve and what you're trying to solution, then you're just chasing another buzzword for the sake of chasing another buzzword, or kind of like a hot topic, right? So at the end of the day, it's buying in, but also really focusing on what are your biggest, maybe 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 pain points that you're trying to solve with the technology? Because a lot of people chase a buzzword without actually know what they're trying to solve for. And at the end of the day, then that becomes an instance of generating more data for the sake of generating data without getting any additional value.
Yeah, it does. It certainly resonates. And I want to add another element, which is actions need to be taken based on the data. And this is where we all play a role in the industry. And we want to take that role, but we need each other to have the correct insights.
Yeah, I think it's the collaboration, but then it's certainly trust, coming back to what Jeff said, right? We are implementing loggers in the whole industry everywhere, right? And we do this not because we want to control, but we want the visibility. But we don't get visibility by adding more and more loggers. We get visibility by sharing the insights and sharing the data with each other. I think we all trust each other in a way. But we just want the data to be visible for everyone, that it will benefit to everyone. And that will make a big change.
Yeah, it's the sharing of data enabling the collaboration. The collaboration on the other topics, if you don't share this vital data, will not bring you the insights that we're all looking for, right? We all have an interest that these shipments work, that they're there in time, that they're in the good quality, and that they reach the patient safely. And by doing this in the most efficient way, and that just the ground or the foundation for that is the collaboration which we need to work on.
And just as an example, we have one collaboration ongoing. It's with Kuehne+Nagel in Amsterdam, where we have these receivers of the trackers, which give a ping whenever there's a pallet close to it. We share that data with Kuehne+Nagel. They also have that information available in their systems.
So that's all for this episode of Inside the Hold. I'd like to thank my guests, Joel Wobmer, Director of Pharma at Air France-KLM Martinair Cargo, Suzanne Hoffman, the pharmacist here at the St. Charles Pharmacy, Felix Fabel, the Associate Director, Logistics Operation Hub at Moderna, Cyril Winkler, the Global Air Logistics Healthcare Product Lead at Kuehne+Nagel, and Jeff Lander, the Director of Global Logistics Engineering at Moderna. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, to share it and check in next time for the next episode of Inside the Hold.